By now, over 90% of the resolutions that were made have been forgotten. I'm not even sure they've been broken. I think we just forgot them by now. Statistical research will tell us that by this time in February, by Valentine's Day, 90% have been broken or forgotten. And I won't ask for a show of hands. But anyway, we may have started the year off saying, I want to lose weight. Well, Valentine's Day kind of ruined that, I suppose. Or maybe you started off and you joined that fitness club, you joined that fitness app, you joined some kind of group at the beginning going, I'm going to get in shape this year, I'm going to exercise more this year, this is my year. It's funny, I was looking at the time slots of Planet Fitness. And on Google, it'll tell you when the heavy times are and when the light times are. And it's very interesting if you look at that. And I went in and talked to some people that work there, and I said, does this ring true? They said, oh, absolutely. Mondays and Tuesdays are our highest days of exercise of the week. By Friday, we're a ghost town. I mean, nobody's in there on Fridays and Saturdays, relatively speaking, to Mondays. Yeah, I know you're in there. But if you go Monday at lunch, you go Monday at 4 or 5 o'clock, man, that place is packed. It's hard to find a treadmill. It's hard to find a weight machine. It's hard to find stuff. I've gone in on Thursday afternoons. I've gone sometimes on a Friday. And, man, it's like I got the pick of the litter, man. I can do anything I want. And it's a microcosm of the larger thing. We start off so great, but somehow we drift. And somehow the sense of discipline is lost. We started off maybe saying, I'm going to stop this habit, or I'm going to start this habit. Whatever that may have been for you. I hope and pray that you have stuck with it, but statistics will tell us that it's likely that we haven't. Some have wishes and some have excuses and some have realities. But the distance between the dream and the reality is simply called discipline. The distance between a dream and a reality is simply called discipline. When I was 48 years old, some of you know this story. When I was 48, I made a decision in my own mind, and unfortunately, I told you. And it was this, that by the time I turned 49, I wanted to run a 10K. And by the time I was 50, I wanted to run a half marathon. And so periodically, I get questions from some of you saying, how's it going? How's it working? Is that, what are you working on right now? And right now, I'm working on a half marathon. The goal is May, but the difference between the dream and the reality is the discipline of doing it. I just can't wake up one day, and you couldn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to go run 13 miles. It takes work and it takes effort. And let me tell you something. It takes two more things. One I can't control, and that's if I were 20 years younger. And the other thing that I can control is this, that as I started to increase my miles, I noticed that my knees started hurting a little bit more. When I was training for a 5K, that's 3 miles, and everything worked fine, and everything was great. When I was training for the 10K that I ran down in Burleson, it was fine. I was never running more than that amount. But as the miles increased, not only in the week, but on my long run days, and so I'm in a running group of some buddies of mine, and I said, hey, what's going on? I'm not a runner, was never a runner, certainly don't look like one either. So I need help. What's going on? And they asked me this very intriguing question. How much cross-training are you doing? And I'm like, man, I'm in my Bible every day. I don't know. I'm glad to know. They said, no, dummy, that's not what I'm talking about. It's good that you're doing that, but that's not what I'm talking about. How many leg days do you do in the gym every week? And I'm like, I run. They said, no, you've got to strengthen the muscles around your knee and around your kneecap. Otherwise, the tendons are going to be overworked and you're going to have a problem as you increase your miles. So now I had a dilemma. Do I want it to be a dream or do I want it to be a reality? Because the distance between those two things is simply the discipline to get it done. It's no different in our lives. I want to be this. Boy, I'd like to know the Bible more. The difference in that dream and the reality is spending time in it. Well, I'd love to, I want to love my spouse more. And we can put all of these things, we can put all these plans. I want to have more when I retire. I'd like to have more in the bank. I would like to be able to have more money than month. I'd love to change my vocabulary. I would love to not be having those thoughts go through my head. I would love to kick that habit. The difference in that dream and reality is simply discipline. We'd love to be a church full of folk. We'd love to have the community know who we are. We'd love to have a reputation in our community that we love people and we accept people and we're friendly. And this is what we want. The difference in the dream and the reality is simply discipline of getting it done. We're going to look at a place today in the Bible that they were struggling with the sense of discipline. You see, motivation can get you going, but it's discipline that keeps you growing. You can get motivated, you can get hyped up, and you could walk out of here and think, man, I'm going to conquer the world, until you clock in on Monday. And you can get all hyped up, and you can get all excited, and you can have a wonderful moment and a wonderful time, and you can be motivated. And it'll kickstart the process. But it's discipline that keeps you going day after day after day, living out that dream that you got motivated to do. Without discipline, you can't reach any of those goals. Without discipline, you won't see continued success. Without discipline, as one person puts it, to live without discipline is to die without honor. And you simply become a slave to your weaknesses. You see, discipline is critical to life and health and success. This applies to you as an individual. It applies to your family. It applies to your business. It applies to your church. It applies in every capacity. If you don't have discipline, you're going to have a problem. And those dreams and those aspirations and the things that you want to be, that stuff you want to do, that bucket list. Because, we have our physical bucket list, and sometimes we have our church bucket lists. Stuff we'd love to do. But without the discipline, we won't see it done. Discipline is absolutely critical, and the Bible does speak to this. Join me in Revelation chapter 3. Jesus has charged John to write 7 letters to 7 different churches. We've already looked at the first 4, and we looked at the habits of love and loyalty. We looked at the habit of purity with Pergamum. We looked at the habit of accountability last time as we looked at Thyatira. Today, we're going to look to the church in Sardis with an eye toward self-discipline, or discipline as a general rule. Write to the angel of the church in Sardis, thus says the one who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars, I know your works. You have a reputation for being alive, but you're dead. Wow. Man, we're right out of the box in this particular letter with this indictment that's being leveled toward the church at Sardis. You got a reputation of being alive, but you're really dead. That is a very powerful thing to consider. To think that you're alive, but in reality, you're dead. They had the reputation of being alive, but the reality of being dead. And when we read through the rest, what we find out is they simply had a lack of discipline. They lacked the discipline to walk in the way that God wanted them to walk. They lacked the discipline to do it the way that God wanted it done. And as they had this lack of discipline, they couldn't move forward. They couldn't move forward out of whatever it is that they were in. They weren't able to move forward. And I think of it this way. It's kind of like if you stand at the edge of a river and you're watching all the water go along. And you're standing still, but everything in front of you is changing. That river, 30 seconds later, that river is different than the river when you walked up to it. And unless you move with the river, you're going to just watch it all go by. And this is part of the process that they were dealing with. They weren't moving forward. They weren't meeting the culture that they had. They were disengaging from things. You know, I did some research on churches in regards to Sardis. And it's really interesting that there's really a 4-part life cycle that organizations or churches go through. And almost all the time, it starts with a man, or it starts with a person. That person is a very intelligent person. That person's a motivating person. That person's a high-energy person. That person kind of kickstarts everything and gets it going. And that person is a leader or is a pioneer and starts something. This person sees things in a different way of doing it. And we see these in our world today. We've seen them over the course of time. Whether it would be, Sam Walton or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, or for Sardis, it was Jesus. He started this thing and he got it going. But then time goes on. And time moves on, and it's easy to get excited about that. And you see a movement happening. Jesus started and he created a movement, and it was an amazing, wonderful thing to behold as this movement was going and lives are being changed. And if you read in Acts 2 and Acts 4, you're going to see life transformation, and you're going to see communities just turned upside down, and you're going to see fascinating, wonderful, unbelievable things going on because of the movement that was created called Christianity. And anytime you get involved in this kind of movement, it's an inspiring process, and it brings people in. There's a belief, there's a cause, there's a purpose, and they understood it, and they went with it, and they were going with it, and the world was being turned upside down. But over the course of time, what can happen is that a movement can then get organized, and a movement can become a machine. And that machine can bring all kinds of order and organization and structure and rules and regulations and all these other things, and it's tremendous. And I look back in Scripture and I see, Abraham started a movement, and it became a machine as Israel was walking their way into exile. Because it had just become this sense of a machine that it just keeps rolling and keeps rolling, but the inspiration is gone and rules have taken over and order has taken over, and before long a machine can move into a monument where you just continue to just do the things you've always done, and you just move in the same way, and you hear things like, well, it's time for the annual ... and nobody even asks why we even do that anymore. You've gotten into this mechanical way of doing things. Verse 1, Sardis has said, you've got a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. What does that mean? They had a lot of things going on, but Jesus didn't view that as life. He saw it as death. We've got to be careful to walk our way through these kinds of things. They were being busy, but they weren't being beneficial. Warren Wiersbe puts it this way: programs don't add life, any more than a circus can resurrect a corpse. What does that mean? What does that even mean? What it means is this: tacking on one more thing doesn't mean that suddenly we're alive again. What life means is that we get closer and closer to Jesus. And what life means is that we resemble Jesus, and we sound like Jesus, and we act like Jesus, and we love like Jesus. And what happened in Sardis is simply that they knew Jesus, and they loved Jesus, but they got overly obsessed with all the mechanics of stuff and forgot the man behind it all. And we all have to be concerned in our own walk with Jesus that we don't get so enthralled in the mechanics of it all that we forget the man behind it all. That we've got to remember it's about Jesus. It's always been about Jesus. It continues to be about Jesus. And if we ever step aside, or if we ever get so enthralled in the programming of it all, in the order of it all, and we forget Jesus, we have lost it all. And Sardis was dealing with this very particular situation. So what does Jesus tell them to do? He says, be alert and strengthen what remains, which is about to die, for I have not found your works complete before my God. So the first thing he tells them is, be alert. Be alert. Stop allowing things that cause death to remain. I know your works. I know your reputation is that you're alive. Jesus said to Sardis, but I think that you're dead. So he's saying, be aware of this. Be aware. Start looking at everything and asking yourself, is this bringing us life or is this not? Is this something that we just do, or is there meaning and purpose and reason behind it that glorifies God, uplifts God, shares the gospel so that we can share Jesus with the surrounding community? Because Sardis can do a whole bunch of stuff, but it doesn't mean Jesus thinks it was the right stuff. And so he's calling them to a state of awareness, to be aware of the causes that lack this self-discipline. Be aware of that. Be alert, that he says. Maybe they lacked a reason for what they were doing. Maybe they lacked the confidence to do what it is they felt they needed to do. Or maybe they just lacked the energy to get it done. But Jesus is saying, you've got to be aware of what's happening, Sardis. You've got to be alert and wake up and look at all that you're doing. Is it what I have asked you to do, or is it just what you want to do? Is this something that I have led you to do, or is it just something that you wanted to do? Is this something that's bringing life, or is it not? And so we have to be careful about these kinds of things. And so the first thing he tells them to do is to be alert. Strengthen what remains. In other words, support the things that are good. Support the things that build up what Jesus wants done. When we look at our own lives and we think about this sense of discipline, all these things take a sense of discipline. You know, it's easy sometimes that you can be on either side of the coin and still lack discipline. You can say yes to everything because you don't know how to say no. Or you can say no to everything because you lack the confidence and the energy to even say yes. And at either end of that extreme, there's no sense of discipline. If you say yes to the things that Jesus wants you to say yes to in spite of everything else, and if you say no to the things that God has told you no in spite of everything else, you're developing this sense of discipline to be aware of what it is Jesus is asking of you and to take the steps of faith necessary. That's the discipline. To take the steps of faith necessary to do what it is that God is asking of you to do. How do you go about doing that? Well, first of all, you got to know what tempts you. You've got to know what tempts you. You've got to know what brings this sense of temptation and what is in you that tempts you, what's out of you that tempts you, and you've got to remove that. You've got to take that out. If you're going to grow and if you're going to develop, then you're going to need to begin with what tempts you. What causes you to break down in the discipline area? What causes you to do that? This is such an important concept. Because I know for some, we don't know how to say no. And then we're overworked, we're overexhausted, we're overextended, and we can't take care of anything. And somehow we've been made to feel bad. Well, if I say no, then that looks bad on me. Well, if you say no, but you're not doing anything else, sure. And if you can say no and honestly and respectfully say, God wants me to do this and not this, that's a whole different game. That's discipline. But we've got to know ourselves. We've got to be aware. We've got to know these things tempt me, and if I'm going to stop this habit, I have to stop going around these people. If I'm going to start this habit, then I need to be around these kinds of people. If I want to break a habit, then I'm going to have the discipline to stop putting myself in a position where breaking it's the easy thing to do. It's a disciplinary process. And we all have our own weaknesses. We all have our own areas of temptation that we break down and we say yes to. But it starts with that. We need to set goals and plan to execute those goals. And here's an interesting thing in trying to have this sense of discipline in our life. Personal discipline. Let me tell you a way, a step in this process that we often overlook. And it sounds way too practical, so bear with me. Eat, sleep, and take a Sabbath. You see, we get so busy that we neglect some of the things that God wired us for. God didn't wire us to go 24/7. God didn't wire us to go 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. God wired us to have Sabbath time. God wired us to have rest time. God wired us to have these moments in our life. But eat, sleep, and exercise are important processes in developing discipline. Because if you're not eating right, then your whole body gets out of whack. If you're not sleeping, then everything gets fuzzy in our brains. It's hard to make proper decisions. You know the magic hour for the devil? That first hour you should have been in bed. That's his magic hour. That's the moment, that moment where you find yourself perusing the internet. That moment when you find yourself with your friends in a spot and in a place that you didn't intend to get to. In that moment where you start the gossip that's going to come out of your mouth tomorrow in your brain then. Why? Why? You start that judgmental routine. Why? Because the first hour you should have been in bed is the hour the devil goes, now I got you. That's when he gets his best work done. When I was growing up, my dad used to tell me, nothing good happens after midnight. You laugh because you believe it too. Nothing good happens after midnight. And I didn't understand that because I was always pushing the envelope. I wanted a later curfew and a later curfew and a later curfew. I did what a teenager does. I pushed the envelope. And he said, look, nothing good happens after midnight. And I'm like, I would beg to differ. And then I ended up at the police station. Because nothing good happens after midnight. Discipline is critical to your walk with Christ. Discipline is critical for a church to walk with Christ. If we don't have discipline, it's so difficult. But the process of developing discipline also encompasses this. You have to learn to forgive yourself. What difference does that make? Let me tell you why. If you don't learn to forgive yourself, the devil will pin you on the mat every time. He'll pin you with guilt. He's going to pin you with shame. He's going to pin you with humiliation. It's like, yeah, but I messed up. Yes, you did. And are you remorseful for that? Have you repented of that? Have you turned around and said, I don't want to do that, and God help me to not do that again? And see, we can seek God's forgiveness, and we want His forgiveness, and we're going to receive His forgiveness. But we put our own selves in jail, and we never let ourselves go free. How can you ever have a sense of discipline if you don't release yourself to walk back out into life again? You've got to develop, and we have to develop this sense of discipline and realize that I can't change what I did yesterday, but the only control I have is what I'm doing right now. I can't control tomorrow. I can't control yesterday, but I can choose right now to have discipline in my walk with Christ. This moment you have control over. That's it. You can make plans, but you don't know if you'll be there. You can plan out everything. You can have everything already lined up, but it doesn't mean you're going to get there. Why? Because life happens. Discipline makes the difference. And he tells them, I haven't found your works to be complete. In other words, there's more to do. You're not done yet. Keep moving forward. And remember what you've received and heard. Keep it and repent. Have the discipline to discover the path God has for you. Have the discipline to sit down and spend time with God and say, what do you have for me? What job do you have? What major do you have? I teach 11th and 12th grade Sunday school right now. And I love it. And I told them last week, and you can ask them, they'll tell you. I told them last week, I blew their mind a little bit last week, and they weren't sure what to think. Because I said, the decisions that you're going to make in the next 7 years, and they wanted me to give them 10, the decisions that you'll make in the next 7 years will alter the next 60 of your life. See, they can attest to it. The decisions between 17 and 25 alter the rest of your life. Why? Because you choose what career you want to do. You choose who you want to spend your life with. You choose the future of your life. You choose retirement. You choose all these things get chosen. And if you don't have the discipline to see it through, you're going to wake up one day and have lost it all. This is what he's telling Sardis. Look, you've got the reputation of being alive, but you're really dead. If you don't discover the path I have for you, if you don't have the discipline to take the path that I have for you, if you don't have the discipline to start on the path and to stay on the path, then it's not going to go well with you. I challenge you. Discover the path God has for you. There's a book by Will Mancini called Unique. Younique. There's a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. This will help you take the steps toward knowing what God has for you as you evaluate some things. It's a disciplinary process. But who wants to be stuck in a dead-end job that you hate every day? Who wants to get up on Monday dreading to go to work? None of us do. That's not the dream, is it? Who wants to get to 65 and 70 and 75 and say, I still got to work 40 hours a week because I don't have enough? That's not the dream. And who wants to see a church keep dwindling and dwindling and dwindling? That's not the dream. Who wants to wake up every January 1 going, this is the same resolution that I've put out there for the last 10 years and I break it every year? That's not the dream. The distance between the dream and the reality is the discipline that you put into it. And that, my friends, is completely up to you.